Ball pythons tend to be picky feeders when compared to other snakes. In today's video, we're going to show you guys tips and tricks to get your ball pythons feeding, whether it being an adult or a hatchling. So let's say you start off with a ball python, you just bought your brand new hatchling ball python, or you just had your first clutch of eggs and you want to get the babies to start feeding. I always say the first feeding is the most important feeding of the whole snakes in life. So if you have a clutch of ball pythons that just hatched out and they just went through the first shed, I always say it's very important to try and feed your hatchlings 2 weeks to 3 weeks after the first shed, just to give them enough time to absorb the yolk. But let's say there's a situation where your hatchling ball python doesn't want to eat after multiple feeding attempts. There's a couple of tricks that you can try to get your animal to feed. So we like to start them off on mouse fuzzies or multi fuzzies, and after 3 times, if let's say the animal didn't feed by itself, we'll try first to center pinky with vanilla extract. If it doesn't eat after vanilla extract, this is normally like 4 weeks after the first initial feeding, we'll go ahead and then try and assist feed the animal. I know a lot of guys would first try and change the environment as an hatchling, but what I've seen in my past personal experience, to have the hatchling to maybe assist feed them once isn't going to do any damage. Normally the hatchling will have a feeding response by then, and they should actually constrict the rodent or the mice item by itself. The last option, if you try to assist feed your ball python and it doesn't want to continue eating by itself, then I would go and change the environment, either take it off from paper and put it on a cocoa husk, or try a different substrate like aspen or even wood chips. But the most important with a hatchling ball python is to be patient and make sure that you always feed not too quickly after the first shed. And if you get a new animal from a breeder or a pet shop, just make sure that the animal acclimatizes to enclosure and feed the appropriate sized meals. Another thing ball pythons are notorious to do is once they reach a certain age or even size, some of them tend to go off food. This female is just over a year old, and the last 3 months she actually stopped eating completely. She was actually in these bigger size tubs. These are similar size to your FB40 tubs, around 80 centimeters in length and around 50 centimeter in width and around 15 centimeter in height. So this female completely stopped eating in these tubs, and you guys will see now what we did. First we tried to change the substrate, and after that didn't even work. So the next option is a smaller enclosure. So after you've tried to change your substrate where you will be keeping your ball python on, and you weren't successful to get your animal back to feeding, I always recommend to change the enclosure size. So whether it being the animal going to a smaller enclosure or going into a bigger enclosure, some animals prefer smaller, tighter spaces, and some animals prefer bigger open tubs or enclosures. So with this female, we actually had her in the FP40 tubs, and now after we put her in this FP10 tub for the last 2 weeks, she's actually started to feeding again. So sometimes you just need to change the enclosure to either a smaller or bigger tub, and to get the animal back to feeding. In breeding season, males tend to go off food. So what I've seen in the past, what you can do in terms of keeping your males on food throughout the season, I've had very good experience by keeping my males just on paper. And what I've seen is, in the past, when I kept my males on substrate, they all went off food during the breeding season, and it was extremely hard to get them feeding if they were not feeding. So the nice thing, if you keep them on paper, you've got a second alternative which you can try. So if they're not feeding on paper, you can put them on cocoa husk or whatever substrate you prefer, and that should normally start getting them to feed. And then the last option is by also moving them into a smaller enclosure to hopefully get them back feeding. So let's say your female just finished laying a clutch of eggs and you successfully pulled the eggs from the female. It's very important actually to wash the female off to make sure you get all of the scent of the eggs off. So what we're going to do is we basically got here F10 solution, which is diluted with water, and all we're going to make sure is to try and not spray the animal's head. All we're going to do is try and gently rinse the snake off, or actually spray it with the F10. All we're doing is making sure we get enough F10 on the female where she laid the clutch of eggs or where she was coiled around the eggs. And all you guys can see is I'm basically just making sure all of the F10 is going around the snake, and just to make sure that we get all of the scent of the eggs of the snake. So as you guys can see is just make sure you get it thoroughly through. And all we're going to do is we're going to take some water and we're just going to rinse the female off. So just going to make sure that all of the scent of the eggs is off of the female. And all we're going to do is try and take a last one more try. And that's it, guys. All you have to do is make sure that the egg smell of the female is removed. This is very important if you want to get your female back onto food. And then the last most important thing is giving her a fresh tub of sawdust or paper or whatever you use as a substrate. So here's our order enclosure. We're going to throw away all of this cocoa husk and clean out this tub. All we're going to do is we prepared a fresh tub of cocoa husk here for her. So we're going to put the female's water over, put her into the tub, and that's it. Normally that's all you need to do to get your female ball python back onto food after they laid a clutch. Normally they're so hungry and depleted that they almost instantly start eating.